She had 60 seconds to decide if her dignity was worth $300,000. The CEO standing in front of her, the same man who'd snapped his fingers at her like she was invisible for 6 months, was offering her a fortune to pretend to love him. But when she looked him dead in the eye and said, "I have one condition," he went pale. Because Naomi Carter wasn't negotiating for more money. She was negotiating for something billionaires can't buy: respect. And what she demanded would force him to choose between his family's approval and the first real thing he'd ever felt in his perfectly controlled life. This is the story of a Christmas that changed everything, not because of what was given, but because of what was finally demanded. Before we dive into how a waitress brought a billionaire to his knees, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss how this ends. And drop a comment right now. Where are you watching from, and what time is it where you are? Let's see how far this story travels. It was Christmas Eve in Manhattan, and Marchand's restaurant was closing. The kind of place where entrees cost more than most people's rent, where old money came to see and be seen, where the waitstaff were trained to be efficient, pleasant, and above all, invisible. Naomi Carter had perfected that invisibility over 18 months of serving New York's elite. At 28, she moved through the dining room like water, anticipating needs before they were spoken, refilling wine glasses with hands that never trembled, even when customers snapped their fingers at her like she was a dog. She had a system for that. When someone snapped, she'd walk over slowly, place whatever they needed on the table, and say with a smile that never reached her eyes, "I have a name. It's Naomi. Use it." Most people blinked, stammered an apology, and never did it again. Some complained to her manager. She didn't care. Dignity wasn't negotiable, even at $7 an hour plus tips. Tonight, she was counting her tips in the back office. $243, enough to cover half of her grandmother's insulin prescription, when she heard the front door chime. They were closed. The lights were already dimmed. She walked out to find him standing in the entrance, snowflakes melting on the shoulders of his $15,000 coat. Dominic Ashford, 34 years old, CEO of Ashford Global Investments, and the most arrogant man who'd ever had the misfortune of sitting in her section. For 6 months, he'd come in every Thursday at 7 p.m., always alone, always ordering the same thing: 20-year Macallan, neat, and the ribeye, rare. He never looked up from his phone, never said please or thank you, and he never, not once, used her name. "We're closed," Naomi said, her hand still on the light switch. "I need a table." His voice was clipped, commanding, the voice of a man who'd never been told no. "We're closed." She enunciated each word like she was speaking to a child. He finally looked at her. Really looked at her. Dark brown skin, natural hair pulled back in a bun, eyes that held a sharpness that made most people uncomfortable. She didn't look away. "I'll pay double. We're still closed." "Triple." "Mr. Ashford, I don't care if you offer me 10 times the menu price. The kitchen is locked. The staff is gone. I'm about to lock this door and go home to Brooklyn on a packed subway so I can check on my grandmother and help my little brother with his college applications. You being rich doesn't make my time less valuable than yours." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or respect. He ran a hand through his dark hair, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked uncertain. "You're right, I apologize." He turned to leave, then stopped. "What's your name?" "You've been coming here for 6 months. You really don't know." "I don't." Naomi Carter." He nodded slowly. "Naomi, I'm Dominic." "I know who you are, Mr. Ashford. Everyone does." He flinched at the formality, like it was a barrier he suddenly wanted to cross, but didn't know how. He stood there in the doorway, snow still falling behind him, looking more lost than any billionaire had a right to be. "I need help, Naomi, and I know I have no right to ask you for it." Something in his voice made her pause. Vulnerability. Real, raw vulnerability that didn't match the arrogant CEO who snapped his fingers at waitresses. "What kind of help?" He took a breath. "Can we sit? Just for 5 minutes. Please." The please did it. She gestured to a table near the window. They sat across from each other, and the strangeness of it, Naomi Carter and Dominic Ashford, sitting together after hours like equals, wasn't lost on either of them. My family, he began, then stopped, started again. Every Christmas, my family gathers in the Hamptons. My mother, Catherine Ashford, runs these gatherings like military operations. This year, she's given me an ultimatum. Show up with a fiancé, someone suitable, or she'll force me into a merger marriage with Vivian Whitmore, the daughter of our biggest investor. And you're telling me this because I need someone to pretend to be my fiancé. For 1 week, Christmas through New Year's, I'll pay you $300,000. The number hit her like a physical force. $300,000. That was Jamal's entire 4-year tuition at Howard University. That was a year's worth of Grandma Claire's medications without rationing. That was the seed capital for the restaurant she'd been planning in a notebook for 3 years. The one that would honor her grandmother's recipes and give her a way out of carrying trays for people who didn't see her. But she kept her face neutral. You want to pay me to lie to your family. I want to pay you to help me avoid a marriage I don't want. Why me? Because you're the only person in my life who treats me like a regular person. Because you don't want anything from me. Because you're smart and sharp and you won't be intimidated by my family. He paused. And because I trust you. You don't even know me. I know you've been taking night classes at Columbia for your MBA. I know you support your family. I know you tell off customers who disrespect you, even when it might cost you your job. I know more than you think. Naomi. She should have been flattered. Instead, she was angry. You've been watching me? I've been noticing you. There's a difference. She stood up. My answer is no. Find someone else to play dress-up for your family drama, Mr. Ashford. Naomi, please. You know what your problem is? You think everything's for sale. My time, my dignity, my complicity in your lies? You think $300,000 erases the fact that you're asking me to be invisible in a different way. To smile and nod and be whatever you need me to be so you can avoid an uncomfortable conversation with your mother. I'm tired of being invisible. She was halfway to the door when he said, You're right. She stopped. You're absolutely right, he continued, standing now, his voice stripped of its usual confidence. I'm asking you to be invisible. I'm asking you to lie. I'm asking you to help me avoid discomfort. And I'm offering you money because that's the only language I know how to speak. But you know what? I'm desperate, Naomi. Truly desperate. And you're the only person I could think of who might understand what it's like to be trapped by other people's expectations. She turned around slowly. What makes you think I'd understand that? Because I see the way you carry yourself. Like you're always proving something. Like you're always one step away from being dismissed. I know that feeling. My family's been dismissing who I actually am my entire life. So yes, I'm asking you to lie. But I'm also asking you to help me buy time to figure out who I am when I'm not performing for them. The honesty in his voice was startling. For a moment, neither of them spoke. If I did this, Naomi said slowly, and I'm not saying I will, I'd have a condition. Name your price. It's not about money. She walked back to the table, placed her hands flat on its surface, and looked him dead in the eye. You don't get to hide me. You don't get to introduce me as just anything. You tell your family I'm your fiancé and that you met me here, at this restaurant where I work. You tell them I'm getting my MBA. You tell them about my plans to open my own business. You don't erase me to make me palatable to them. You present me as someone you chose, someone you're proud of. If you can't do that, keep your money. Dominic stared at her like she'd just spoken a foreign language. His mouth opened, closed. She could see the calculations happening behind his eyes. The social cost, the judgment, the whispers. You're asking me to bring a black waitress to my family's Christmas in the Hamptons and introduce you as my equal? No, I'm asking you to introduce me as your fiancé and tell the truth about who I am. If that's too much for you, then you're not ready for this. And honestly, Mr. Ashford, you're not ready for me. Would you take that deal? $300,000, but only if he respects you publicly? Drop yes or no in the comments. Let's see what you do. 24 hours later, Naomi was sitting in the passenger seat of Dominic's Mercedes, watching the mansions of the Hamptons grow larger and more intimidating with each passing mile. The ring on her finger, a vintage silver band with a raw emerald that she'd insisted on instead of his generic Tiffany diamond, felt both weightless and impossibly heavy. They'd spent the morning in his penthouse going over their story, how they met, how he proposed, the details of their whirlwind romance. But what stuck with Naomi wasn't the script they'd rehearsed. It was the moment when she'd asked him, "What are you most afraid of?" And he'd answered without hesitation, "That I'll get everything I'm supposed to want and realize it means nothing." Now, as they pulled up to the Ashford estate, a sprawling 12-bedroom cottage that probably cost more than most hospitals, Naomi felt her stomach tighten. Through the windows, she could see people moving, beautiful people in cashmere and pearls, holding champagne flutes, laughing the kind of laughs that came easy when you'd never worried about rent. "We can still turn around," Dominic said quietly. "I'll pay you the full amount. We'll say you got sick. And let you face them alone? After I made you promise to tell the truth?" She looked at him. "We made a deal, Dominic. I keep my promises." Something softened in his face. "Thank you." The front door opened before they reached it. A woman stood framed in golden light, tall, thin, with silver blonde hair, and the kind of bone structure that belonged on currency. Catherine Ashford. Her smile was warm and welcoming, right up until her eyes, which were calculating the value of everything they touched. "Dominic, darling, you're late." Her gaze slid to Naomi, and the temperature dropped 10 degrees. And this must be the surprise. "Mother, this is Naomi Carter." Dominic's hand found the small of Naomi's back, warm and steady. "My fiancée." Catherine's smile didn't waver, but her eyes did something sharp and assessing. "Fiancée, how unexpected. Do come in, both of you. Everyone's dying to meet her." The entry hall was all marble and crystal, the kind of space designed to make visitors feel small. A crowd had gathered, 20, maybe 30 people, all turned to stare. Naomi recognized the look in their eyes. The same look she got from customers who couldn't believe their waitress had opinions. Curiosity mixed with dismissal. A man who could only be Dominic's father stepped forward, silver-haired, cold-eyed, radiating the quiet menace of old money. "Son, introduce us to your guest. This is Naomi Carter," Dominic said, his voice clear and firm. "We met at Marchand's, where she works as a server while completing her MBA at Columbia. She's brilliant. She's building a business plan to revolutionize urban dining. And 6 months ago, she called me out for being arrogant. Best decision I ever made was coming back to apologize." The room went silent. Naomi could hear her own heartbeat. Then Richard Ashford did something unexpected. He laughed. Not a polite chuckle, but a real, genuine laugh. "A woman who puts you in your place. I like her already. Welcome to the family, Miss Carter." He shook her hand. His grip was firm, respectful. For the first time since arriving, Naomi could breathe. But not everyone was as welcoming. A woman detached herself from the crowd, mid-20s, bottle blonde, wearing a dress that cost more than Naomi's rent. Vivian Whitmore, the woman Dominic was supposed to marry. "How romantic," Vivian purred, air-kissing Dominic's cheeks. "A restaurant server. That's so grounded of you, Dom. Tell me, Naomi, what do your parents do?" The trap was obvious. Naomi smiled sweetly. "They're dead. Car accident when I was 12. But before that, my father was a postal worker and my mother was a nurse. They taught me that honest work is nothing to be ashamed of." "What do your parents do, Vivian?" "My father owns Whitmore Capital." "Oh, the firm that got investigated for insider trading last year? How did that turn out?" Dominic choked on his drink. Several people nearby suddenly found their shoes very interesting. Vivian's face went red. "The charges were dropped," she said icily. "How fortunate." Naomi's smile never wavered. Catherine swept in, diffusing the tension with practiced ease. "Dinner is served. Naomi, dear, you'll sit beside Dominic, of course. We have so many questions about this whirlwind romance." The dining room was cavernous, a table that could seat 40, set with china so delicate It looked like it might shatter if you breathed on it wrong. Naomi found herself surrounded by Ashfords in their circle, all watching her like she was a specimen under glass. "So, Naomi," Catherine began, her voice honey-sweet, "how did Dominic propose?" This was the moment, the story they'd rehearsed. But when Naomi opened her mouth, what came out was the truth. He didn't actually, not in the traditional sense. She looked at Dominic, who'd gone very still. "He asked me if I'd consider spending my life with someone who'd been too blind to see me for 6 months. Someone who'd finally realized that love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone real. He said he wanted to be with someone who'd never let him forget where he came from, who'd call him out when he was wrong, who'd see him, not his last name." The table had gone quiet. Naomi continued, her voice softer now. "And I said yes because for the first time in my life, someone was asking me to be exactly who I am. No performance, no pretense, just me." When she finally looked up, Dominic was staring at her with an expression she couldn't read, something raw and unguarded. "That's beautiful," Catherine said. And for once, she sounded like she meant it. If you're loving this story, hit that like button and drop a comment. What would you have said at that dinner table? And don't forget to subscribe. This story is about to take a turn you won't see coming. After dinner, Catherine showed them to their room. The engagement suite, she called it, with a smile that had teeth. One room, one bed, nowhere to hide. The moment the door closed, Dominic exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for hours. "That story you told, about the proposal. I improvised. You said make it believable." "It was more than believable, Naomi. It was—" He stopped, shook his head. "Thank you. For tonight. For all of it. Don't thank me yet. We're only one day in." They got ready for bed in careful silence, moving around each other like dancers who'd never learned the steps. When they finally lay down, Dominic on the left side, Naomi on the right, a Grand Canyon of space between them, neither could sleep. "Can I ask you something?" Naomi whispered into the darkness. "Anything. That nightmare you have, the one about your father. What does he say to you?" Dominic was quiet for so long she thought he wasn't going to answer. Then, "He tells me I'm weak, that I'll never be enough, that everything I've built will crumble because I don't have what it takes." "And do you believe him?" "Every single day." Naomi turned on her side to face him. In the dim light filtering through the curtains, she could see his profile. Strong jaw, tense shoulders, a man carrying the weight of expectations that weren't his to bear. "You know what I think? I think you've spent so long trying to be what everyone expects that you forgot to figure out who you are. And that's scarier than failing. Because if you never try to be yourself, you'll never know if you were enough all along." He turned to face her, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. "Who are you? Naomi Carter?" "I'm still figuring that out, but at least I'm asking the question." They fell asleep facing each other, the space between them somehow smaller than it had been. The next morning was Christmas. The Ashford family gathered in the drawing room for the annual gift exchange, a sterile ritual where staff members handed out expensive presents wrapped in designer paper. It was joyless, transactional. Everything Naomi imagined Christmas in this house would be. She had nothing for Dominic. In the chaos of the past 48 hours, it hadn't even occurred to her. She was about to apologize when he stood up and said, "Excuse me for a moment." He returned 5 minutes later holding a small package wrapped in simple brown paper. He handed it to Naomi in front of everyone. Inside was a book, a first edition of The Souls of Black Folk by W.E.B. Du Bois. But when Naomi opened it, she gasped. On the inside cover in faded ink, "To Claire, may you always know your worth. Mama 1968. This is," her voice broke, "this is my grandmother's. She lost this in a move 30 years ago. How did you—" "You mentioned it once, 3 months ago. You said it was the one thing she wished she still had. I've had people searching estate sales ever since." Tears streamed down Naomi's face. This wasn't money. This was listening. This was caring. This was someone seeing her so completely that he'd spent months trying to give her back a piece of her history. "I don't have anything for you," she whispered. "Yes, you do." He took her hand gently. "Close your eyes." She did. He placed her hand over his heart. "Just breathe with me for 60 seconds. No performance, no expectations. Just exist." They breathed together, and Naomi felt his heartbeat, steady, strong, real, against her palm. When she opened her eyes, he was crying. "That's the first real gift anyone's given me in 20 years, he said. The moment shattered when Julian, Dominic's younger brother, cleared his throat loudly. "How touching. Although I have to wonder, Naomi, what your endgame is here. I mean, a waitress landing a billionaire? That's quite the upgrade." "Julian!" Dominic's voice was ice. "No, it's okay." Naomi set the book down carefully and stood up. "You're right, Julian. It is an upgrade. For him, because I don't measure people by their bank accounts. I measure them by whether they treat service workers like human beings, by whether they remember details about people who can't do anything for them, by whether they're brave enough to be honest about who they are. On all those counts, I'm the upgrade. And if you spent half as much energy being a decent person as you do being jealous of your brother, maybe you'd understand that." The room erupted. Catherine looked scandalized. Richard looked impressed. Vivian looked furious. And Dominic? Dominic was staring at Naomi like he'd just watched her slay a dragon. But Julian wasn't done. "You want honesty? Fine. We did a background check. Your family's broke. Your grandmother's diabetic. Your brother's tuition is overdue. This whole thing, it's a con. You saw a rich man and you played him." Naomi felt the room close in. Every eye on her, every judgment crystallizing into certainty. She was the gold digger, the liar, the fraud. Dominic stood up, his chair scraping violently against the floor. "Get out." "Dom, I'm just saying, get out of this house. Now." His voice was shaking with rage. "You want to know why I'm with Naomi? Because she's the only person in this entire family who's ever been honest with me. Yes, she's a waitress. Yes, she's putting herself through business school. Yes, she's taking care of her family. And you know what that makes her? Strong, honorable, real. Everything this family pretends to be but isn't." He turned to face his mother. "I'm done, Mom. Done performing. Done pretending. Done sacrificing who I am for your approval." Naomi asked me to introduce her with dignity, and you know what I realized? She's the first person who ever asked me to have a spine. So here's my choice. I'm with her. Actually with her. Not as a contract, not as a performance. I'm in love with her. The world stopped. Naomi's heart stopped, because that wasn't part of the script. "I'm in love with you," Dominic said again, looking directly at her now. "I know that breaks our agreement. I know I'm supposed to confess and walk away, but I can't. I fell in love with you the moment you demanded I see you, and I'll spend every day proving I'm worth the faith you had in me." Naomi couldn't breathe. "Dominic, you don't have to say it back. I just needed you to know." But she was already crying. "You idiot. I fell for you 2 days ago when you told me about your nightmare, when you trusted me with your fear, when you let me see you. So we broke the rule. Completely shattered it. What do we do now?" She laughed through her tears. "I guess we figure it out together." He kissed her, in front of his entire family, in front of the people who judged her. He kissed her like she was the only real thing in a room full of beautiful lies. When they broke apart, Catherine was crying. Not sad tears, something else. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I'm so sorry, Naomi. You're right. About all of it. I've spent so long protecting this family's image that I forgot what family actually means." She looked at her son. "You deserve to be happy, Dominic. And if Naomi makes you happy, then she's family." Richard stood up, walked over, and shook Naomi's hand again. "Welcome to the family, Ms. Carter. The real welcome this time." 2 years later, Naomi stood in the kitchen of her restaurant, Claire's Table, watching the Michelin inspector take notes. The place was packed. The menu was her grandmother's recipes elevated with fine dining technique. And the man washing dishes in the back? That was Dominic Ashford, former CEO, current investor in minority-owned businesses, and the love of her life. He'd walked away from his family's company to build something real, something that mattered. They got married 6 months ago in Brooklyn, surrounded by Naomi's family and the Ashfords, who'd slowly, painfully, learned what it meant to be family instead of just a name. As Naomi watched Dominic laugh with her little brother Jamal, who was thriving at Howard, she thought about that Christmas Eve, when a desperate billionaire walked into a closed restaurant and asked for help. When she demanded respect instead of just accepting money, she taught him how to see people. He taught her that love wasn't about finding someone perfect. It was about finding someone brave enough to grow. That night, as they closed the restaurant together, Dominic pulled her close. "Thank you." "For what?" "For having that one condition. For demanding I be better. For loving me enough to challenge me. Thank you for being brave enough to meet the challenge." "Always," he whispered. And he meant it. If this story touched your heart, show some love. Hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and drop a comment telling me, would you have demanded respect over money? And what's the bravest thing you've ever asked someone to do for you? Share this with someone who needs to hear that their dignity is worth more than any dollar amount. New stories every week. Until next time, remember, the best love stories aren't about finding someone who completes you. They're about finding someone who challenges you to be whole. 2 years later, Naomi stood in the kitchen of her restaurant, Claire's Table, watching the Michelin inspector take notes. The place was packed. The menu was her grandmother's recipes, elevated with fine dining technique. And the man washing dishes in the back, that was Dominic Ashford, former CEO, current investor in minority-owned businesses, and the love of her life. He'd walked away from his family's company to build something real, something that mattered. They got married 6 months ago in Brooklyn, surrounded by Naomi's family and the Ashfords, who'd slowly, painfully learned what it meant to be family instead of just a name. But on this particular Tuesday evening, as the last customers filtered out and Naomi locked the front door, she noticed Dominic standing at the kitchen window staring out at nothing. His phone had been buzzing all day. He'd ignored every call. "You going to tell me what's wrong, or are we going to pretend everything's fine?" Naomi asked, wiping down the bar. He turned, and the look on his face sent ice through her veins. "My father had a stroke this morning. He's in the hospital." "Oh my God, Dominic, why didn't you tell me? We need to go." "There's more." He pulled out his phone, pulled up an email, and handed it to her. It was from the Ashford Global Legal Team. The subject line read, "Urgent, emergency board meeting required." Naomi scanned the contents. Her hands started shaking. Richard Ashford had named Dominic as his successor in his will. But there was a stipulation, a clause Richard had added 2 years ago, right after that Christmas. If Dominic wanted to inherit controlling interest in Ashford Global, he had to return as CEO within 30 days of Richard's incapacitation or death. If he refused, control would pass to Julian, and Julian had already called an emergency vote to sell the company to Whitmore Capital. Vivian's father's firm, the same firm that had nearly been destroyed by scandal. They were buying Ashford Global for parts, planning to liquidate assets and eliminate 3,000 jobs in the process. "They're dismantling everything my grandfather built," Dominic said, his voice hollow. "Every employee, every legacy investment, gone. Unless I come back." "Then you come back," Naomi said immediately. "You fight for those jobs." "Naomi, if I go back, I become that person again. The one who lived for board meetings and profit margins. The one who didn't know your name. I finally figured out who I am without all that." "I can't." "Yes, you can." She took his hands. "Because you're not that person anymore. You're someone who washes dishes in a restaurant kitchen because he believes in building something real. You're someone who fought his entire family for me. You think you can't go back without losing yourself? I think you can't not go back, because 3,000 people are about to lose everything, and you have the power to stop it." "And what about us? What about the restaurant? I'd have to move back to Manhattan, work 80-hour weeks." "We figure it out. That's what we do, remember? We figure it out together." He pulled her close, buried his face in her hair. "I'm scared." "Good. That means it matters." The emergency board meeting was scheduled for Friday, 3 days away. Dominic spent 72 hours reviewing files, calling old contacts, building a coalition. Naomi barely saw him. When she did, he looked haunted. Thursday night at 11 p.m., there was a knock on their apartment door. Naomi opened it to find Catherine Ashford standing in the hallway, her usual polish cracked by exhaustion. "Is he here?" "He's in the study." "Catherine, what's wrong?" The older woman's composure finally broke. "I need to tell you both something. Something I should have said 2 years ago." She walked past Naomi into the apartment. "Dominic!" He emerged from the study, shocked to see his mother. "Mom, what are you doing here? Is Dad—" "Your father is stable, but there's something you need to know before tomorrow's meeting." Catherine sat down heavily on the couch. "That clause in the will, the one forcing you to choose between your new life and the company, I wrote it." The room went silent. "What?" Dominic's voice was barely a whisper. 2 years ago, after you walked away, your father wanted to disinherit you completely. He was furious, humiliated, but I convinced him to add the stipulation instead. I thought if you had time away, you'd realize what you were giving up, that you'd come back on your own, humbled and grateful." Tears streamed down her face. "I was trying to control you, just like I always have, and now Julian's using my manipulation to destroy everything." "Why are you telling me this now?" Dominic asked, his voice cold. "Because your father woke up this afternoon, for 10 minutes, and you know what he said." Catherine looked up at her son. "He said, 'I was wrong about the boy. He's stronger than all of us. Let him choose.' Then he slipped back into the coma." She stood up, walked to Dominic, and placed a folder in his hands. "These are proxy votes from every board member who still believes in what Ashford Global used to stand for. Before we became corporate raiders, before we forgot that companies are made of people, your father collected them over the past year. He was planning to give them to you. He wanted you to come back, but as yourself, not as him." Dominic opened the folder. Inside were signed proxy statements from 8 of the 12 board members. "With these votes in your shares, you control the company," Catherine continued. "You can stop Julian. You can stop the sale. But more than that, you can remake Ashford Global into what you wanted it to be, a company that actually gives a damn about people. Why didn't Dad just give these to me? Because he was waiting for you to be ready. And honestly, so was I." Catherine looked at Naomi. "You changed my son, made him brave enough to stand up to us. And watching that, it changed me too. I've spent the last 2 years volunteering at a food bank in Harlem, trying to understand the world outside my bubble, trying to be better." She hugged Dominic, a real hug, not the stiff, performative embraces Naomi had witnessed 2 years ago. "Go to that meeting tomorrow, not as the son we tried to mold you into, as the man you chose to become." The Ashford Global boardroom was exactly as Dominic remembered, all glass and steel and cold, filtered air. The 12 board members sat around the obsidian table, Julian at the head looking smug, Vivian beside him, her father on speakerphone from Whitmore Capital's office. Dominic walked in at exactly 9 a.m. He was wearing jeans, a button-down shirt, and work boots, the same clothes he wore in the restaurant kitchen. "You're late," Julian said, "and underdressed." "I'm 3 minutes early, and I'm dressed like someone who's been working." Dominic took his seat, not at the head of the table, but in the middle among the other members. "Let's get started," Julian smiled. "Great. All in favor of accepting Whitmore Capital's acquisition offer?" "I invoke my right to present an alternative proposal," Dominic interrupted, "as majority shareholder and designated successor." He placed the folder of proxy votes on the table. Julian's face went white. "I have controlling interest in this vote, which means the sale doesn't happen unless I approve it. And I don't." Dominic stood up. "But I'm not here to just block Julian's play. I'm here to propose something different. A complete restructuring of Ashford Global." He pulled out his laptop and projected his presentation on the screen. "For the past 2 years, I've been working with small business owners, watching them build something from nothing. learning what it takes to create actual value instead of just extracting it. And I've developed a new model for Ashford Global. The presentation was revolutionary. Instead of hostile takeovers and asset stripping, Dominic proposed investing in underserved communities, funding minority-owned businesses, creating jobs instead of eliminating them, measuring success not just in quarterly profits, but in long-term community impact. "You're talking about charity," Julian scoffed. "This is a business." "No, I'm talking about sustainable capitalism. Companies that give back to their communities generate long-term loyalty, positive press, and actually grow faster than extractive models. But more than that, they mean something. They matter." Dominic looked around the table. "My grandfather started this company to create opportunity. When did we become the people who destroy it?" One of the older board members, Margaret Chen, who'd been with the company for 30 years, cleared her throat. "What's the projected ROI on this model?" 15% annual growth over 5 years, with significantly lower risk than our current aggressive acquisition strategy. I've run the numbers 100 times. He clicked to the next slide. "But here's the thing, even if it were only 10% growth, it would still be the right thing to do." "The right thing doesn't pay dividends," Vivian's father said through the speaker. "Actually, it does, just not immediately. And that's the problem with people like you, Mr. Whitmore. You're so focused on quarterly earnings that you can't see 10 years down the line. You're strip mining the future for present profits." Dominic closed his laptop and looked around the table. "I know most of you didn't expect me to show up today. I walked away 2 years ago, and you wrote me off. But I'm not here begging for my old life back. I'm here offering you something better, a company we can actually be proud of, one that doesn't make us choose between profits and principles." He pulled out one more document. "I'm proposing we decline Whitmore Capital's offer and implement this new strategy. And to prove I'm serious, I'm pledging my entire inheritance, my shares, my trust fund, everything, as collateral. If this plan fails, I lose everything. But if it works, we change what it means to be a company in the 21st century." The room was silent. Margaret Chen spoke first. "I've been waiting 30 years for someone in this family to say something like that. You have my vote." One by one, the board members with proxy votes voiced their support. When the final count came in, Dominic had won, 9-3. Julian stood up, his chair scraping violently. "You self-righteous? I'm offering you a job," Dominic interrupted calmly. "Head of Community Investment. Use your business degree to actually build something instead of tearing it down, or you can walk away with your severance package. Your choice." Julian stared at his brother, stunned. Then he grabbed his briefcase and stormed out. Vivian's father disconnected without a word, but Dominic didn't care, because standing in the doorway, watching the whole thing, was Naomi. She'd closed the restaurant for the morning to be there. When their eyes met, she smiled, and he knew. He'd made the right choice. Would you risk everything you've built to save something you'd walked away from? Drop your thoughts in the comments and tell me, do you think Julian will take the job? 6 months later, Claire's table had expanded to 3 locations across New York City. Each one employed formerly incarcerated individuals, paid living wages, and sourced ingredients from local minority-owned farms. And Ashford Global? Under Dominic's leadership, it had become the first major investment firm to be certified as a B Corporation, legally required to balance profit with social good. They'd funded 200 small businesses in underserved communities, created 15,000 jobs, and posted their most profitable quarter in company history. Julian had taken the job, reluctantly at first, then with genuine enthusiasm when he realized that building communities was more satisfying than raiding them. Richard Ashford recovered from his stroke. He'd never be the same, but the first thing he did when he could speak again was call Dominic and say 3 words he'd never said before. "I'm proud, son." On a crisp Saturday morning in October, Naomi and Dominic stood in the kitchen of the original Claire's table, teaching a cooking class to a group of teenagers from Brooklyn, kids who wanted to learn the restaurant business. Jamal was there too, home from Howard for fall break, helping his sister demonstrate how to properly season cast iron. Grandma Claire sat at the corner table, her insulin pump humming softly, watching her granddaughter teach the next generation with tears of joy in her eyes. As the class wrapped up and the teenagers filed out, chattering excitedly about their dishes, Dominic pulled Naomi aside. "I have something for you. If it's another antique book, I'm running out of shelf space." He laughed. "Not a book, a question." He pulled out a worn piece of paper, the original contract they'd signed 2 years ago. "Remember this? The contract where we both failed spectacularly at not falling in love? That's the one." He took out a lighter and held the flame to the corner of the paper. They watched it burn, the ashes falling into the sink. "I want to make a new deal with you, Naomi Carter." "Oh, what are the terms?" "No terms, no conditions, no clauses or stipulations. Just a promise that every day I choose you. Not because a contract says I have to, not because it's convenient, not because you complete me, but because you challenge me to be whole." "What do you say?" Naomi pretended to consider it. "That's a terrible contract. No exit strategy, no defined timeline, no measurable deliverables. The worst deal you'll ever make." "I'll take it." She kissed him, tasting smoke and promise, and the future they were building together. "On one condition," he groaned. "Of course there's a condition. You have to keep washing dishes in my kitchen, even when you're running a billion-dollar company, because the man I fell in love with was the one who wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty." "Deal." He kissed her again, longer this time. "Although technically, I'm only running a $500 million company." "My mistake. Maybe I should renegotiate." "Too late. You already agreed." Grandma Claire called from her table. "Y'all done making googly eyes at each other? Because I'm ready for my lunch, and I know y'all didn't burn my kitchen down with that dramatic fire ceremony." They laughed, and Dominic went to start preparing Grandma Claire's favorite, shrimp and grits with extra butter, the way she taught Naomi to make it when Naomi was 10 years old. As Naomi watched him work, this man who'd gone from snapping his fingers at waitresses to washing dishes in a Brooklyn kitchen, from corporate raider to community builder, she thought about that Christmas Eve 2 years ago, when she'd demanded respect instead of just accepting money, when she'd asked him to see her, really see her. She'd taught him that dignity wasn't negotiable. He'd taught her that people could change if they were brave enough to try. And together, they'd proven that the best love stories aren't about finding someone who completes you. They're about finding someone who challenges you to become who you were always meant to be. That night, as they locked up the restaurant and walked home through Brooklyn, past bodegas and barbershops and the bodega cat that always meowed at Dominic, Naomi squeezed his hand. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For being brave enough to meet my condition, for choosing growth over comfort, for proving that people are worth more than profits. Thank you for having the condition in the first place, for demanding I be better." He stopped walking, turned to face her under a streetlight. "You saved me, Naomi, not from my family or my company, from myself. We saved each other." She stood on her toes to kiss him. "That's the deal." And it was a deal they'd keep for the rest of their lives. If this story moved you, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and share this with someone who needs to hear that choosing integrity over convenience is always worth it. Tell me in the comments, what's the biggest risk you've ever taken for love? And would you burn the contract like Dominic did, or keep it as a reminder? New stories drop every week, and trust me, the next one is going to blow your mind. Until then, remember, the best deals in life are the ones written in trust, not ink. Your worth isn't negotiable. Never forget that.